Hey, Baldy, hey, what's my favorite snack? Well, if you're anything like me, it's a smooth, rich brie spread over a nice crostini with some flakes of sun-dried tomato. It's ribs. Hi, I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Weird Project. In this episode, I'm batch painting some skeletons. I'm making them for a Frostgrave, one of the core scenarios, but you could use this in any fantasy setting. And yeah, I'm experimenting with batch painting, trying to get several models done in a uniform way to tabletop standard, not perfect. Let's take a look. I picked up these skeletons at Red Castle Games, my FLGS. They're from the Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures line that WizKids puts out, so they're official D&D product. I think that's the case anyway. I like them. The detail is nice. The material is a little weird. It's kind of soft and bendy, but overall they're okay. Did my best to scrape off all the mold lines. I couldn't find a ton, and after painting I don't really see any that I missed, so I think I did alright, and I think the mold itself is pretty good. They came with these thin little bases, which I was happy to use, but they also have sort of a base molded right onto their feet. So after gluing them down to their bases, I textured the rest of the exposed area of the base with some sand and some broken glass chunks that I got at the Dollar Tree. These turned out to be really useful later. I primed them with a Krylon spray. Not the same color I used on the mausoleum, it's a more kind of a rich yellow brown, but it's the same line. And we're going to see I had kind of similar problems as the last one with the mausoleum. Here I'm base coating all the exposed skeleton bones with skeleton bone. It's a color from Reaper. Right away I started to notice that it was beating up, a lot like the wash did when I did it on the mausoleum. That's from that Krylon base spray again. And I could tell that getting all the base coats on was going to be pretty challenging. Basically, you have to work the section over and over and over until it starts to stick, and then it'll start to go on, but it does take a lot of extra time. I probably could have resprayed with black and done a white zenithal highlight, but I wanted to proceed with this color. I thought it would make the bone color work up a little bit better. I'm happy with the results overall. Following the base coat on the bone, I bring in brown to base coat pretty much everything else. All of the armored parts and the metal weapons are going to be kind of rusty and old, and so I'm putting a base coat of brown down to bring in a dry brush metallic over it later to give it kind of a rusty look. And then the rest of the stuff is kind of faded leather, and that'll also work up from brown. Here comes that metallic dry brush I was talking about. This is blade steel from Reaper. And I just kind of roughly go over all of the armored shoulder pads, the helmets on the guys that have the helmets, and the metallic parts of the weapons. So the sword blades and then the pick part on the guys that have the picks. All the base colors are done, so now I want to hit everything with a black wash, get down into those crevices, deepen up the shadows. I was a little concerned at first because it looked really shiny. I thought maybe somehow metallic stuff had gotten into the wash, but it looked fine when it dried. After the wash dried, I came back for some simple highlights on the brown leather parts. First with just the brown that I started with, and then a little bit higher to bring up the lightness a little bit more around the edges, anywhere that it would kind of bulge out. Then I needed to bring back the bone a little bit. The grime of the wash was great, got down into the cracks, but it also dirtied up the bone quite a bit more than I wanted to. I mean, yeah, it should be dingy, but mostly at the edges and down in the recesses. I want the surface of the bone to still be kind of bright. The guys with the helmets and the picks also had some stringy hair coming out from underneath the helmet, so I mixed up kind of a brownish gray and applied that to the hair and also the handle of the pickaxes. Last little detail for the figures themselves was to take black and put it down into the eye sockets as deep as I could get it. I wanted it to look really sunken and hollow and maybe a little haunted. Put it into the open mouths of the ones with the pickaxes too. The figures are done, so I'm going to move on to the bases. I start by filling in everything with black. It took a couple of coats. Here the Krylon issue was really pronounced. But once that was dry, it was easy to dry brush over it with a gray, and then something fun. I was happy with the overall look of the figures, you know, aged, dingy skeletons coming out to, I don't know, wreak havoc or maybe just sell cookies. But I thought the overall look could use a little something extra to punch it up a bit. So I took those glass pieces that I talked about earlier when I did the texturing, and I decided that they would be green crystals, glowing green crystals. Maybe these crystals are what makes the skeletons get up and walk around and sell cookies. I also thought this would be the perfect opportunity to try out a technique called OSL, Object Source Lighting, where you paint color onto the model that represents light from somewhere else, in this case the glowing crystals. So at each step I took whatever color I was doing and did a rough dry brush around it on the sand, and then also up onto the model at the legs and the pants or loincloth or whatever, where the light might be hitting it coming off of that crystal. I worked up successive layers of color around the edges, thick at first and then narrowing and narrowing, until finally at the very edge of each crystal I've got a very bright color, even with a little bit of yellow mixed in, to really accentuate the glow. And that also goes on to the model itself and the sand around it to make it look like that is light coming off of it onto the surrounding material. Aside from some spray-on varnish, these are basically done. I'm pretty happy with them. I think they came out really well. I like the dingy part of the skeletons. I'm really pleased with my foray into OSL. Yeah, I think these are just great. And there we go, they're all done. I'm really pleased with the results. I like how they came out. I enjoyed the batch painting process, and it was kind of freeing to just kind of let go and say, listen, just put paint on them, get them tabletop ready, it's fine, don't fret too much over every little highlight and things like that. I did take a little bit of indulgence with those glowing green rocks, and yeah, that's fine. Let's get all the standard stuff out of the way real quick. If you like this, please hit that like button, maybe consider subscribing, sharing, all that. And if you want to support the channel directly, there are some links down below to let you do that. You can look at my book, you can buy some things on Amazon that use my affiliate link. You don't pay anything extra, they just kick me back a little bit if you buy my chipboard or whatever else I've got in there. So anyway, back to lessons learned. I make these projects as much to learn something as to make something. And so I like to round up what I think I've learned at the end. So the first lesson is, not all spray paints are created equal. The Krylon that I'm using on this and also on the Mausoleum video is their Color Max line. Now I have a black in this line and it's actually worked pretty well, so I don't think it's a problem with the general formulation. But these colors, they were Sand Dollar for the Mausoleum and Summer Wheat for these guys. They just had so many problems with holding the paint immediately over that base layer of spray paint. So I'm probably not going to use them again. Not a knock on the product. I'm sure for what it's for, whatever that is, I know they didn't make it for us mini painters. I'm sure it's great, but it's really not good for what I'm doing with it. On a positive note, the batch painting process went really well. Keeping the skeletons all together, painting each color on each one at the same time, same techniques at the same time, like dry brushing the shoulders. That happened all at once across all of them. I think it went really well. I think it gave me a standard of quality that is perfectly good for tabletop, and I'm actually pretty happy with. Even the more complicated part at the end with the OSL went well, doing it across each one together. And I kind of learned a little bit on each step as I went, so that I could go back and continue that process the next time around on the next layer of green color. And that goes right into the last point I want to talk about, which is that OSL, that object source lighting. I was really nervous about it, and kind of skeptical about it. I've seen lots of it online, and if you go out and just search for OSL miniatures, you'll find a lot. And what I've encountered is either it looks amazing and you can't tell, like it really just looks like there's light, or it looks just like paint slapped on and it looked bad. And I haven't really seen much of a middle ground. And this isn't to knock anybody. Everybody's learning. Everybody's trying new things, myself included. I have no idea if these look great or not. I think they look great, but that might just be because I'm dazzled with trying something new. But anyway, it was fun to try. It was a lot less complicated than I thought. I think certain situations, certain setups might be a lot harder, like if you got a really focal piece of light, or a really broad piece, like if a model, like if I was lit very brightly from this side, which I kind of am, and, you know, not lit very well at all from this side, you know, that might be harder to do with the stark contrast and shadows. But just this little bit of glowing rock, it was really easy to try this out, and I'm really happy with the results. So that about wraps this one up. Hope you enjoyed this. I sure did. Next video is going to be a little bit of a departure from the Frostgrave project. I got a gift recently that I'm excited about, and hoping to share the results with you. Let me know what you thought in the comments. If you've got any suggestions on OSL, or any batch painting tips, I'd love to hear those. And yeah, till next time, take care, everybody. Same techniques, it's at the